Autistics grieve in unique ways. Some may not appear to be grieving at all, while others show their grief constantly. Grief for autistics might show up in laughter, complete withdrawal, or needing to be around others while not discussing their feelings. However each autistic manages their grief, their self-care needs to be respected, validated, and supported on their own terms. On this episode of today's Autistic Moment, Lisa Morgan will talk about how autistics experience disenfranchised grief and how they can manage and support themselves. Join us now for this important topic. Welcome everyone to today's Autistic Moment, a podcast for autistic adults by an autistic adult. My name is Philip King Lowe. I am the owner, producer, and host, and I am an autistic adult. Thank you so very much for listening. Today's Autistic Moment is a member of the Autistic Podcasters Network. Explore, engage, empower. Today's Autistic Moment, the podcast for intersectional autistic adult communities. This first segment of today's Autistic Moment is sponsored by the Autism Society of Minnesota, known as AWESOME throughout Minnesota's autism community. As Minnesota's first autism resource for more than 50 years, AWESOME serves the whole state, the whole spectrum for the whole life. Visit AWESOME online at ausm.org. Please visit today'sautisticmoment.com, where you can listen to the podcast, get transcripts, program updates, and read the guest bios pages. Please visit the Future Shows page to read the titles, guests, and descriptions of all shows coming up. The transcripts are sponsored by Minnesota Independence College and Community. There is a link provided to get access to a document form of the transcript without the purple-colored background so that you can print it without using up the ink on your printer. The written document has a font that is accessible for dyslexics. There are additional transcripts available in Spanish, German, French, and Chinese simplified. While visiting the website, please consider supporting the work of today's Autistic Moment with a financial donation. When you tap or click on Support Today's Autistic Moment, you can click on the coffee icon to make a one-time donation, or tap the Patreon icon to become a monthly subscriber. Donations to today's Autistic Moment are not tax deductible. You can purchase a 16-ounce drinking cup or a lapel pin at the Logo Shop. Please follow today's Autistic Moment on Facebook, Twitter X, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Blue Sky. Join today's Autistic Moment community group page on Facebook for conversations and updates. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel at Today's Autistic Moment to watch any episode of Autistic Voices Roundtable discussions celebrating intersectional autistic lives. Stay with us after this first commercial break, when Lisa Morgan and I will discuss self-care, grief management, and supports. Today's Autistic Moment can be downloaded and heard on most podcast apps, including Apple, Google Play, Breaker, Castbox, Overcast, iHeartRadio, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Spotify, TuneIn, Pandora, Amazon Music, Audible, Podcast Addict, Podcast Chaser. If you are looking for the transcripts, go to todaysautisticmoment.com, click on the episode you want to listen to, and follow the directions to find the transcripts. Thank you for listening to today's Autistic Moment.
Support comes from Minnesota Independence College and Community, a life and career skills program for young adults with autism and learning differences. Help a young adult take a step towards their independence and a vibrant life. Learn more at miccommunity.org.
Support for today's Autistic Moment comes from Best Care Home Care Agency. Best Care offers PCA services, and your friend or family member could be your paid PCA. Best Care also offers homemaking, FMS services, and 2, 4, 5D services throughout the Metro and Greater Minnesota. Visit their website, bestcaremn.com, to learn more about their services.
If you need me, I'll come running. And if you fall, give me a hand. I'll pull you up out of the wreckage. I'll be there time and time again. Even if the clouds are raining down, 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 I'll be there. I'll walk with you, just lean on me. I'll walk with you, just walk with me. If you're cold, I'll bring a sweater. And if you're tired, I'll lift your head. I'll pull you close and make it better. I'll stay with you until the end. Even if the clouds are raining down, 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 I'll be there. I'll walk with you, just lean on me. I'll walk with you, just walk with me. I'll walk with you, just walk with me.
Lisa Morgan, welcome back to today's Autistic Moment. I enjoy having you here, and we're talking about a really important, relevant topic today. So, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really great to be back.
Yeah. Today, I am concluding my third Summer of Self-Care series. I've been doing these since 2022, and it's really done well because during the summer months when life changes a lot and so many other things change, and I like to have this summer self-care series. I call it the SOSS, because, as my previous guests and I have been talking about, autistics can do our own self-care, and one autistic person's self-care does not have to look like someone else's. And, we've really been stressing the importance of self-care. So, one of the things I'm thinking about is um, this episode is occurring right on September 8th, after we've just moved from the summer months into the beginning of fall. Lots of people have gone back to school or started school for the first time. We have lots of routine changes in the works as the seasons change weather-wise and so many things. And my experience, I've done a lot of grief, what I call grief companionship, I call it. I like to think of it as walking with, if you will. And so I'm just so grateful that we're talking about this topic, because there's so many things happening in the lives of a lot of autistic adults. So I'm glad to have you here with me to talk about this conversation, this topic.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here too.
So let's together, you and me, explore this topic of self-care, grief management, and supports for our autistic adult communities, and of course, many of our intersectional communities where there's so much going on. So let's start there. Go ahead.
Sure. So, autistics experience grief in different ways
Mm,
and for very many reasons besides the death of a loved one. Like you just said, when people are starting to go back to school, that change can cause grief for autistic people. Grief can also come from thwarted belonging, and the thwarted
right.
belonging can be the result of just being autistic in our society, or the intentionality of race, sexual orientations, gender identity, or disabilities. And the grief of autistic people can be complex because many times our grief is called disenfranchised grief, which can leave an autistic feeling totally alone.
Right. Completely isolated.
Yes.
And we also know that there are autistics out there who may not be entirely aware of their grief,
Yes, that
might
is
not
true.
know how they're really feeling in that grief. Um, there are some autistics, let's start with the death of a loved one, who may not feel anything at the moment. They may not feel anything even after having gone through the funeral or burial procedures. They may not feel anything. And I know that there are some autistics who have heard someone say, "Well, don't you care that this person is gone?" That sort of thing. I've heard of people saying things like that. And some of that can just be, again, because of, you know, sometimes we just don't know what's happening with us. Sometimes we may not feel anything. That doesn't necessarily mean we're not grieving. Go ahead.
That's true. That's true. And I mean, yes, alexithymia plays a part in that, where we don't exactly understand or can't identify our own emotions. Slow processing speed can come in there for us. I know just in my own experience, I had lost a friend in the last year. And when I got the call, um, I listened to the information while the friend who was calling me was emotionally upset. It didn't happen for me for 2 or 3 hours later. And then I was alone.
Mm,
Instead of on the phone with my friend when I could have shared that emotion, it happened for me 2 or 3 hours later. And so then I was alone. So that happens for autistic people as well.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Now, you started to talk about, as did I, about how grief is not necessarily isolated, if you will, for people who have experienced the loss or death of a loved one. Um, and this is where there's so much information about us that really needs to come to the forefront, both for autistic adults and those who are around us. the loss of a routine can really bring about some grief.
Yes.
And of course, accompanying that by some of our caregivers is, well, you shouldn't be so upset about that.
Yes, and, I think kids, autistic kids, can experience that too, as well as teens and young adults, when school's out and they
Uh,
have, their semester is over or the school year is over and people are like, "Hey, yay, it's summer," or you get to have a summer job or, do an internship if you're on, your college summer. Um, but for all of them, they might be feeling the angst of routine change, which results in grief. And so that it's a mismatch from what they're hearing and what they're feeling,
right.
which leads into what I had said before about disenfranchised grief. I think a lot of the grief that autistics experience is disenfranchised grief. And it was coined by Ken Daka in 1989. And what it means is it's grief that others do not understand. So
Right.
it's not validated, it's minimized, and it just doesn't fit in with society's way of grieving. So I think
Right.
a lot of the grief that autistic experience is different, disenfranchised grief.
Yeah, I appreciate that term. It's still new to me. I like that phrase, disenfranchised grief. Um, our grief is not necessarily shared with what others will experience. Um, and again, we will experience it in different ways. Um, you know, um, there are autistics who don't really want to be around someone when they're grieving, and that's okay. Yeah, that's perfectly okay if they feel that way. There are others who they need to be around somebody while they're grieving. If they're completely alone, they feel threatened by whatever they may not be able to talk about or identify necessarily. And then there's what you and I have talked about a year ago, that is really doesn't need to be brought to the forefront again. Our grief may not necessarily be shown in our faces or our body language. You know, there are those who their faces just don't change with their emotions. They're just as is, that sort of thing. And so, once again, someone might say, you mean you aren't grieving more than you are? I mean, someone might take that as to say, they dislike this person or what. Um, Other people, their grief is very palpable from the outside, and they may not realize what their body language or their facial expressions are saying. I've had many meetings with various people who have told me that my face suggests that I am angry, and I'm like, that's
Yeah.
news to me. You know what I mean?
I've had that too.
Yeah, I have people tell,
Really angry about.
really, that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking.
Yeah.
Yes, and there's also um autistic people who will laugh in their grief. Um, I did some work on one resource that I'll be sharing, autismgrief.org, and I wrote some content for the website, and yeah, some autistic people, they will laugh, and it has nothing to do with how they're feeling inside. It has to do with how they're regulating or how they're feeling their emotions. It's just different. Yeah, there are assumptions that are made depending on body language, which is very different for autistic people. We don't Everything can be happening on the inside for us, and we can look perfectly calm and fine on the outside.
I also want to talk about some other moments that some grief may show up,
Mhm.
um, and either be really intense for some autistics or maybe not so intense. You know, um, Maybe the therapist that one has been working with has retired or left the agency, and that therapist just happens to be somebody who's been really making a difference in your life, really making a difference. The loss of that therapist can be a real point of grief because
Yes.
I know a lot of us, we get working with this therapist and we're making all this progress for ourselves. And just when we feel like we've reached a point of feeling a lot better, they get to know that, the therapist that's there. I just want you to know that I'm going to be retiring in about, 2 months here. And so hopefully they've got a therapist who knows how to work on bringing closure, including listening. Okay, how do you feel about that? Tell me how you feel about me retiring or leaving the agency. And then let them get that out and let them help them with the closure, the closure process.
And I think for autistic people, that therapist would do well to also, you know, explore how change is going to work out for that person. Because if they've been seeing the therapist for a long time and they were seeing them, say, Mondays at 4, you know,
Right.
how is that going to change for them? Because not only will they be grieving the loss of the therapist, but they're going to be experiencing that change, which could also be a different kind of grief.
Right.
They also, the way autistic people like to prepare, what is that preparation for Mondays at 4? What's going to happen then? And helping them to walk through all the aspects of the transition.
Yeah, absolutely. I had another kind of conversation a few years back. Someone who is autistic um, came into a forum and mentioned that their service animal had died,
Yes.
their emotional support animal. And then this person said that she didn't really experience any grief until she went into her therapist's office and saw one of the other clients waiting who had their own service animal. And then she completely lost it, absolutely lost it. And, she was like feeling sorry for that, feeling badly about that. And I replied, I said, well, it's completely understandable to me why you would. You know,
Yes.
our emotional support animals often know our emotions better than we do. you know, and they know exactly what we need when we're experiencing those emotions. So to have that relationships torn, of course it's going to cause some grief and crying and anger and all the rest. Of course it's going to happen, you know.
Right. But it was probably from, different than society's way of doing it. There's that shame piece that she felt of she shouldn't be doing this. And that also, it's not it's not like autistics can just grieve. They also have that shame piece, and a lot of times they have invalidation, minimizing of their grief. So um it's more than just grieving. There are other things involved as well.
Absolutely. And another one that I can really identify with. um I remember when I was identified um back in 2012, actually sorry, 2011, when I was first I diagnosed. I went through an intense grieving process for the next 3 years
Mhm.
of grieving the person that I thought I was up to that point in time.
Yes.
Life I had made for myself up to that point in time, because I realized that that person is now very different in my mind. The memories and the things that I did are now very different.
Mhm.
And for me, one of the deepest parts of my grief was, the career that I had and I loved so much at the time. I was a church organist and choral director, and I had gone through 6 years of college to earn that degree, and it was a really big deal for me. And I had had so much trouble keeping my jobs and everything like that. And I realized how many of those professional relationships were destroyed and they can't be repaired. I went through an intense period of grieving that. Like I said, it took me a good 3 years. And, there's that sense of the things that I worked for, the things that I thought I had accomplished, which we did. Let's give us credit where credit is due. But then there's that feeling, I don't know that person anymore.
Yes.
There
Yes.
is a grief that goes. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, there is definitely a grief that goes along with the diagnosis if you're diagnosed with autism later in life. There's all what you just explained, and there's also missed opportunities. There's, people go back and think about conversations they had. If only, I had known, then I could have done that differently. How would my life be right now if I had known and could have just made my life around integrating autism into it. And so, yeah, there's a lot of grief. I help, I support autistic people integrating autism into their lives after a diagnosis. And sometimes they're in their 60s and 70s. And that's a lot of grief.
Yeah, yeah, especially since, you know, I'm in my mid 50s now, but when you get into your 60s like that, and even the 40s or 50s, but there's so much of your life that you can't get back again, and then you go through this thing about, oh my gosh, uh yeah, and
Yeah.
um good.
And then again, I mean, I don't want to keep this part, but again, these people are having a different experience than the people around them who might be saying, "You're not autistic." They may have
Yeah,
just found out who they really are. They don't, they're figuring it out, but they got the diagnosis, and the people around them don't believe them, even support them in their grief over something that they don't believe. Again, it becomes disenfranchised.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you get the people who are telling you things like that. You get the people saying, "Well, have you tried this treatment that's supposed to be able to quote fix you?" That sort of thing. And no wonder at the very beginning we're kind of like, "What? No way!" You question a lot of things after that period of time.
Or that, oh, finally, this makes sense. Finally, my life now makes sense, and no one will believe. You still have the grief of everything that could have been or all those memories,
Right.
but it fits for you finally, and you're feeling a little bit okay about that. And then people that you love don't just don't believe you. So
Yeah. And especially if people are, you know, when your autistic characteristics show themselves and people start saying, you just need to grow up there or mature there, you just didn't mature right, all those sorts of things.
yeah.
Cruelty and bullying brings about grief because there's a sense of things you believed about yourself that you're now being told, or some laughing matter, or that sort of thing. um and let's also just say something very important again as we're exploring this topic to kind of bring the aspects of this around. Some of the problem for a lot of us is that grief is compounded from one incident after another, one routine after another. We don't exactly have control over routine changes, and they're just part of life, but we're trying to get caught up somewhere and we keep losing it and losing this, losing that, losing this, you know, losing a relationship, losing your benefits, which is a horrible thing to happen to anybody, or your support services, or we've seen a lot of that sort of thing happening. And those things, they all pile up, and before you know it, the grief is so much, so intense, we have to really start unpacking some of that stuff. It takes a long time to be unpacking that sort of thing.
Yes, and when more things are happening while you're trying to unpack it, it is very arduous. It just is really hard. And even a special interest can, if it's something you can't do anymore for any myriad of reasons, That also is a deep loss for some.
One of the things that's happened to me ever since my career had changed for a long time there, I had gotten to a proficiency playing organ that I was really proud of. I had reached a point, and then after a while, that proficiency just wasn't what it was, and I just felt like I can't regain that. And sometimes with something like that, maybe you can't. Maybe it's just not possible. And this is one of those things that I like to kind of say to some caregivers. If your autistic loved one is feeling that loss, please don't force them or try to talk them back into something they may not be able to do. They may, but they may not be, which may mean that they need to select a new direction for themselves. And just that transition can bring grief, and it can bring a lot of disenfranchisement. A lot of the disenfranchisement comes from losing friends, losing their family members who just give up or just make life a little more difficult. After this next commercial break, Lisa and I will talk about how autistics can become engaged in their own self-care to manage our grief and get the supports we need. We will also talk about using our autistic strengths to empower us to look after ourselves. Join my panelists and I on September 18th at 2:00 p.m. Central Standard Time on the YouTube channel at Today's Autistic Moment for Autistic Voices roundtable discussions for the topic, I Love Being Autistic, Here's Why. During this live and recorded roundtable discussion, we will put away the doom and gloom about our autistic challenges and stigmas to talk about being autistic as something to be enjoyed and celebrated. If you need a lift from the reasons autistics need to be fixed or treated, this is the conversation you will want to listen to. Thank you for watching Autistic Voices Roundtable Discussions. Today's episode is brought to you by Matthew, the #ActuallyAutistic Coach. If you're an autistic adult seeking support, or a friend, family member looking to better understand and assist autistic adults, Matthew is your go-to resource. As a seasoned teacher, consultant, and mentor, Matthew is dedicated to empowering the autistic community. He offers free support groups for autistic adults, educational workshops, and online meditation circles for mindfulness. For organizations, Matthew provides specialized training sessions on inclusivity. With over 15 years of mentoring autistic entrepreneurs, he offers personalized one-on-one coaching, guiding individuals to start businesses, manage careers, and build healthy relationships while embracing their authentic autistic selves. Matthew believes in thriving, not just surviving. Visit theautisticcoach.com today for a more empowered future.
Life managing you, or are you managing your life? Do you want to find more peace in your life? For many of our clients, self-care is a key to success. Skill building and feedback is essential for self-care. Looking Forward Life Coaching helps provide structure through our person-centered approach that has demonstrated growth for many of our clients. If you or a loved one needs help with structure and strategies around self-care, please visit us at www.lookingforwardlc.org, email us at info@lookingforwardlc.org, or call us at 612-504-7414. Self-care and resiliency can help you weather the storms of life. Looking for life coaching helps change stumbling blocks of life into stepping stones toward success.
A few weeks ago, something wonderful happened when Gus Waltz cried while his father gave his acceptance speech. Gus cried, as did many of us neurodivergents, because Tim Waltz honored his son as a human being who means more to him than some diagnosis. Gus shared his emotion because he was accepted and loved by his father, with no expectations for Gus to be anyone else than who he is. Gus's joyful and proud cry is the happiness and pride that every neurodivergent should know for themselves, and that we are people of strength, courage, and infinite possibilities. Thank you, Gus, for being an example of the goodness of all neurodivergent people for all of the world to witness. Today's Autistic Moment is the podcast where we celebrate being neurodivergent and intersectional. Today's Autistic Moments network of autistic advocates like Lisa Morgan enjoy sharing our experiences with you so that we all see that we don't have to overcome being autistic or any other intersectional identity. We can be who we are, love who we are, and succeed. The sponsors and supporters of today's Autistic Moment help make this programming possible. If you'd like to contribute, please visit todaysautisticmoment.com and click on Support Today's Autistic Moment. You can make a one-time donation of $10 to $20 or more through Ko-fi, that's Ko-fi. Donors contributing $25 or more will receive a complimentary logo lapel pin. Alternatively, you can become a monthly supporter through Patreon and receive a free logo 16-ounce drinking cup. The hyperlinks are included in the transcript so that they can be accessed easily. Your support helps keep today's Autistic Moment accessible and true to its mission of exploring, engaging, and empowering our intersectional autistic adult communities. You can also support the podcast by sharing the show and each episode on your social media networks. Now join Lisa Morgan and I as we continue our conversation. How do we get our autistic intersectional communities engaged in the self-care of their grief? This is where we want to give some recommendations as to how to manage it. And let me begin by saying some of the suggestions we may be giving here may not fit for you. And if they don't, that's okay. If you find something that helps, fine. But if it doesn't, you haven't done anything wrong. It just doesn't work for you. But we're going to give some ideas as to how you can get engaged with your self-care. But I'm going to give you some time to answer, of course, Lisa, but I want to begin with my favorite. This is one of those things that I have said to many people who are grieving loss, and especially a lot of our autistic and our intersectional communities. Never let anybody tell you someday you will get over this. Never say that. I would say that to someone who is not autistic, the same thing. I always say, don't let anybody tell you that. Number one, it is extremely cruel. Number two, you don't know that.
Yes, that is very true. There is no time. There's no
No.
time limit on grief.
Yeah. And sometimes when grief is involved, I'm going to say it, you need to stay down as long as you need to.
Mhm.
You get up when you feel ready. But if you don't feel like it's time yet, it's okay for you to stay down there for a while to kind of get a hold of yourself or just deal with what things you just don't understand. Okay. Sometimes we need that time, but I'm going to let you go ahead and move, pick up where I'm leaving off here, Lisa.
Sure. So yeah, so sometimes you definitely need that time. You definitely need to feel whatever feelings that you have, or even if you don't know you're feeling them, but you just feel unmotivated. Yeah, definitely take care of yourself in that way. But there's also some autistics who need to go to work or need to go out because that is the way they can deal with the loss. And that's okay too. Um, one of my one of mine is to set boundaries for yourselves, um, instead of others dictating what you should or shouldn't do,
Mhm.
including a traditional funeral. You know, if someone can go to part of it and somebody can't go to any of it all, or they don't understand it at all. You know, I had heard of was a story given by a I don't know his age, young African American male whose father had died. Um, and he just did not understand, why do I go to this place when my father's not there? Like,
Mm.
why would I go? He's not there. He's gone. He's dead. Like didn't understand, and he was getting pressured by the traditions. So set boundaries of what you can't or cannot do as far as traditions or what people are expecting. And I'd also say too that taking care of yourselves by staying hydrated, eating healthy food, getting as much sleep as possible is really important in taking care of your body as well as your the emotions.
Yeah. And, you need to find yourself some safe spaces where you can either deal with your emotions or sometimes you're in a place where you're living with family that's really torn up, but you need some space to kind of be away from that for a while. That's okay too.
Mhm.
Again, sometimes it's really difficult when people are grieving because they're not completely rational at that point. And so sometimes they respond to rational things like I need some time to be alone, sometimes they don't.
Mhm.
So, my recommendation is that if you're in a place where you can't necessarily go to your own space, and you might pick for yourself your favorite place to walk or sit on a bench and be kind of quiet for a while, and just spend some time being alone with yourself. Or if you've got that group of people that really does support you, then go spend some time with those people. Um, you know, And then there's the matter of being angry, which is so important of an emotion. If you folks want to talk about anger management, go back to my episode in late May with AJ Locascio about anger management, especially, you know, um, a lot of losses is really trauma, and that trauma also needs to be dealt with. The other
Yeah.
thing that can come up, if you've got someone who's passed or someone or a relationship that's broken off, and you haven't had an opportunity to, get your emotions out about what this person has done, or there's a lot of us who, after someone has passed or a relationship is broken up, that we realize how one may have been abused in that relationship, and boy, can that bring along a lot of grief.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah. So part of your self-care, part of your engagement is just learning about where your grief may be coming from. And once again, don't let anybody tell you get over it, and don't let somebody tell you these are things that you must experience, especially if you don't. Um, you know, um, sometimes a good way to get your anger out of your system might be to find a safe, again, I emphasize safe space, a way that you're not going to harm yourself or others. Just some people like to just break bottles. Just make sure they're in a place where nobody gets cut. But sometimes it's just one of those things that we need a space that's ours to really experience our grief or not experience our grief, especially if people are telling us how to, you know.
And that's the key, right? Is people telling us what we should feel, what we should do, is that's not good for us. And and setting those boundaries is not, I would, just speaking for myself, I guess, but
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of autistic people have really good sense of being able to stand up for themselves and set those boundaries. But they really are needed, especially um, to keep themselves on an even keel and to be able to grieve the way they need to grieve. That's going to be so important.
Another thing that I like to mention as part of your self-care is when you're grieving losses, um, you need to find something, either it's one of your stims or your hobbies or something, so that you can be distracted from it for a while. You really do need that time when you're just thinking about something else. Um, it's important because your brain may need some space just to process some of that. Um, and grief can go through many stages. Um, if it's something that you want to remember that person by, or um, get your emotions out, and you know that they're just not going to listen, either open up your phone or or pad or paper or whatever you do, and just write out exactly how you feel. Um, just write it out and spit it out. A lot of us can actually write it better than we can say it. That's okay too. Um, Finding ways to write it out, to say it.
And even moving your body, like you said, walking, uh, moving around. Um, Sometimes even, doing something. I know somebody who had to go bowling because they enjoyed bowling, they enjoyed the sound, and it just, I think it just, like you said, distracted them. But, unfortunately, other people didn't think that they should be bowling because they should be grieving, and that's what they were doing, though. They weren't bowling, they were grieving.
Yeah, and absolutely. And also, like, if you're somebody who happens to work with clay, work with some clay or whatever, just find something that makes you feel connected. I mean, um, there are what I call rituals that you can do. Let's say, for example, you were really close to the person that's, let's say, died. Let's use death again as an option. Here's something that really can work. It depends on who you are, but here's a few things that can work. One, I actually did this after my mother passed away. That's a suggestion of a good therapist. My first birthday without my mother was 2-3 months after she passed. So at the advice of my therapist at the time, I went to a Walgreens, and I was in the aisle with the cards, and the instructions were to pick out a birthday card and read it and imagine that my mother had
Oh,
written that card and was saying those words to me. And so I did that. I did. I went and found a card. There was one card in particular that I started to read, and I said, this is exactly what my mother would want me to know. Now and yes, the tears streamed down my face. I said, this sounds exactly what she would want me to know at this particular stage. And sometimes if it's somebody you've been married to, an anniversary card might work. If you're somebody whom you and your romantic loved one, maybe you were the types that sent, cards to each other, whatever. You can go to somewhere, get a card, thinking of you card, and maybe read it and say, okay, this sounds like what this person would say to me. If that does not work for you, again, you don't have to. But again, these are some things that have worked for me and for others. Sometimes things like creating a little, I call it a little shrine with some pictures of that individual, or if you already got one and it's just making you mad, go ahead and tear them apart and get rid of them, whichever way works for you. And if your emotions are constantly changing, that's not a bad thing. Okay. That's actually a natural thing. Our emotions are just so either they're happening or they're not. And once again, you can take as much time as you need or do what you need. Go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, one thing that worked for my family and I after my husband died was on Christmas, I just asked the kids what they wanted to do. And he always had gotten up Christmas morning and sat in his chair and had coffee. So they wanted to put coffee next to his chair. And we did put a hot cup of coffee next to his chair. And you know what? That's what they wanted to do. And that's what we did. And they felt good about it. And then on his birthday, we ate his favorite food and watched his favorite movies. And that's what they wanted to do. So, whatever feels right or feels good, it doesn't matter if it's, something that no one else has done before. It just helps the family or you, or, if you're supporting someone, it just whatever helps. Asking is big, ask the person what would help you right now.
And now you've just talked about a topic that you are really, really, you are an expert about talking about that. The grief that comes from somebody having taken their lives by suicide is a grief that I don't think there is a proper explanation for it, but it can definitely be a different kind of grief.
Yeah.
So please feel free to talk about that because I think it's important.
Sure. It is a grief that comes along with many, many other things. It's so complicated. You're angry at the person, and yet you tend to blame yourself because of what you may have been able to say to them, or did you say something wrong to them, especially if it may have happened after a disagreement, and it's unexpected. So it's traumatic, depending on how you find out, whether you yourself or somebody tells you about it, things that are unsaid, and you're left to pick up all those pieces. And there's always, always, always like, why, and you find out why. And that complicates the whole grieving process because you don't know if you should be angry or if you should be sad, and you go through all of those.
Okay.
And then, there's just the always wondering like what you could have said or done. And really, when it comes down to it, if somebody wants to take their life, they're going to, and it's nothing that, definitely always try to save somebody's life if possible, if they're suicidal. But in the end, if they really want to, they're going to do it. And it's nobody's fault.
Here's a part of self-care that I think we need to talk about, Lisa. One of the sources of a grief like that it could be because of a suicide. It may not, maybe because of an illness that it just happened so fast. There are those things that are unresolved between you and that individual. There are those things that you wish you had said, those things you missed. Maybe you missed the opportunity to say whatever it was. And boy, like I say, that not only creates a lot of guilt, it creates a lot of, was it my fault? As you
Right.
just mentioned. And let's talk about, please give some ideas about how people can take care of themselves in those situations.
Well, really, understanding that it is nobody's fault. It's really, I believe, not even the fault of the person who dies by suicide, because there are reasons compelling them, whether it be a mental illness or, a traumatic event, something that they can't get over, and it's usually escaping something. They're trying to get away from something. Um, and it certainly isn't anybody's fault who is still living, because if somebody really does want to die by suicide, there's really not a lot you can do to change their mind about that. But always try. But
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
I go back and forth, could I have done something? Could I have said something for my husband? And it was a choice that he made.
Yeah. And I also want to just be sure we point out that being in a state of grief, especially if it's a career or just once again, you've lost your housing, which again, the things about things like that is they repeat themselves quite a bit. And they can lead to suicidal ideation, because the grief of those losses is so tragic. Um, you know, y-
And and
Go
that
ahead.
is true. That is true, because in the midst of, losing my husband, I did lose my house. I lost
Mm.
my job. There's many other losses that you are grieving. Um, if that, if it's head of household, or if it's even, your support person, there could be so many other losses that coincide with that.
Well, now I want to turn to the third part of my program, which is, um, how can we empower our intersectional autistic adult communities here? Um, when we talk about our intersections, we are talking about races, cultures, sexual orientation, gender identity expression, and that sort of thing. We are talking a lot about that. Um, we may be talking about the loss of one's health.
Yes.
When one's health changes and it can't really be undone, there's a lot of grief to be said for that. When we talk about empowerment, where would you begin with that, Lisa?
I would begin by just encouraging people to be who they know they are and do what they know they need, no matter what other people are telling them.
The empowerment kind of comes from by becoming the expert about your own brand, make, and model of autism. That's always an empowerment.
Yeah.
It's difficult for you to be empowered by anything if you don't really know yourself, your how you're autistic. And of course, let's talk about this. Um, you talk a lot about using your autistic strengths.
Yes.
In fact, I've been using that term a lot since you said it last year.
Oh, awesome.
Um, but yeah, why don't we talk about the strengths? Because the strengths of autism can really be part of the empowerment to do your self care when you're grieving. Go ahead.
Well, I use one of mine a lot as being rule based. So I know I tend to be rule based. So I can make rules for, say, I need to stay hydrated. So I have a water bottle with me at all times, and I drink so many ounces by lunch and so many ounces by dinner and so many ounces before I go to bed. Just make sure I stay hydrated. And because I'm rule based, I use that strength. But
Mm.
there's also honesty. That can go pretty far in helping self with the grieving process, but by being really honest with the people around you that I need to do this or I don't need to go here, and grieve in your own way that I am not done grieving yet. I had somebody after 2 months tell me that I was just grieving for too long. I'm grieving almost 10 years is next year is will be the 10th year and I'm still grieving in ways. So, and being okay with that, no matter what people are saying to me, just being okay with what I need and how I feel. It's helped me.
Yeah. One of the things that's really unavoidable, I feel, is that going through a grief process will change us in
Yeah.
some way, shape, or form. Okay. Um, one of the things about when I'm grieving a death, for example, I go through a pretty horrible year after. I don't want to jinx myself for the next one, but that's when the washer machine breaks down, the tire on the car gets a flat, or um just there's so many different things that can happen to you, and it feels like it's just adding to your misery while you're grieving. I'm laughing at it because that's part of my stuff, but I'm laughing at it because it's a little comical. I say that because someone would say, okay, the washer machine broke down, and that's one of those moments where the person that I've lost would be able to know what to do, and I just don't. So, of course, that's going to happen, So that's why I kind of make a little bit of a comical out of it, that sort of thing. And then, you can kind of, well, what can I do? Um, I can't do what that person used to do when they used to fix these problems for me. But what can I do to get this problem fixed?
Right. Right. And I have I have kind of a funny example. Um, Putting an air conditioner in a window with two uh, very early teens. In fact, one of them wasn't even a teen yet. Um, so what we did was we had plenty of books. So I put a book under each end of the air conditioner and kept putting books under and kept putting books under until it was level with the window. We did the air conditioner over. There's always a way to figure out how to do something if you need to do it. You have to hire somebody where you wouldn't have before. Um, and that can either be defeating or it can be, I did that. That was my resilience is I knew that on this one I had to hire somebody and that's okay.
Yeah. And I know that can be hard because oftentimes after a loss like that, money is no friend um of ours. Sometimes you can decide you're going to challenge yourself to do something. A few years ago, I had to go through some physical therapy after a fall. And there's another thing that can really bring about a grief is if you've had a fall and it's changed your life a lot.
Yeah.
Um, but I went through a process with a physical therapist where um, they told me, okay, what we need to do is help you. You're down on the floor. How are you going to get yourself back up? You know, and they told me if you have to sit there and think through your steps about how you're going to do that, you need to give yourself permission for that. And I
Yeah.
find a lot of the things that I need to do, including dealing with grief, dealing with an adrenal, when, you know, we had a few 2 years ago when our cat gets sick, he needed to go to a vet. And the thing is that sometimes when it's just not working, life is just not working, taking some time to breathe some air, number one, get some oxygen back in your body. And number two, think about the steps you need to take that will work for you to
Yeah.
get to your next level.
And I love how you said give yourself permission. Giving yourself permission to take a day off, to eat comfort food, to, have a day of self-pity. Sometimes I would have self-pity like for an hour. I'd time myself. Okay, your pity party for an hour, and then you got to get going. Whatever works. And I also had, I would pick out words and put it on a whiteboard. My favorite one was resilience. And every time I go by that whiteboard, I remind myself, that's my word for today. So you do have to kind of get through each day sometimes each morning or each afternoon, but taking one step at a time. And like you said, you planning your steps.
Mm.
Yeah, giving yourself permission is that's an awesome idea.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll give an example that really was another point of grief for me is, when my back pain became such that I had to start asking my husband Jason to do some things for me that I was used to doing for myself. Boy, can that bring on some grief when you start to lose some of your independence. That's a really hard one.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that I just had to come to the realization there are just some things I can't do like I used to do them. I really do need his help. And I know this is really complicated because of how many of us have asked people for help and they've said no, or they've belittled us for having asked in the first place.
Mhm.
But there are times when you just can't do what is being expected of you or what this is another one where a lot of us autistics get really challenged, is where we expect ourselves to do things we may not be able to do, and then we break down because we can't. Okay.
Yes, it's a perfectionism piece too.
Yeah, absolutely. So part of giving ourselves that permission is to give ourselves permission for not being perfect,
Yes.
especially if life is not perfect right now. I like to say that when you're grieving a loss, any kind of loss, no, life is not the same. And yes, it is very difficult to walk through. So don't, part of giving yourself permission give yourself permission to feel what you're feeling and to go through that process of, this is really difficult for me and I don't know how to get past it. And sometimes it's just a matter of time. For me, actually, having to apply to get home services, that was a bit of a grief for me when I finally realized my executive functioning is such that there are things I just simply cannot do the way they need to be done. I need help to get them done. So I went through the process and I've gotten some people to help me, and it's really improved my life. But making that transition to that point, it was really, really, really hard for me.
And what you're talking about is what I call, and lots of people call, the new normal. And that's difficult for autistic people because we like routine and we like to know what's going to happen. And
Mm.
so that new normal can be so difficult.
Yeah.
And I fought it for a long time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I had people expecting me, and you brought this up a little bit ago, expecting me to be the same person I was on June 23rd, 2015. And I was not the same person June 24th of 2015.
After this final commercial break, I will thank Lisa for this superb conversation, followed by today's Autistic Community Bulletin Board.
Hello, autism community. My name is Lisa Morgan. I'm an autistic adult too, and I know firsthand what it feels like to be unintentionally harmed by well-meaning professionals when reaching out for help. My passion is to help autistic people find and use their own unique strengths to help themselves. Are you rule-based, a literal thinker, have a focused interest? Let's figure out together how to use the strengths of autism to find solutions. I offer life coaching for autistic adults and individualized workshops for professionals. To find out more, go to autismcrisissupport.com.
On September 22nd, Nicole LeBlanc will be my guest for Autistics Living Among Unsupported People. Inadequate housing for autistics often results in living with people who do not support them. Many autistics live with family or roommates or have property managers who are not helpful in meeting their autistic needs. Nicole LeBlanc joins me to talk about how autistics can manage their support needs in such environments. On October 4th, Catherine Parsons will be my guest for Autistics Using AI. Artificial intelligence is the latest and hottest internet tool. Every social media platform or software used for writing documents, collecting information, and searching is more accessible than ever because of AI. Like any internet program, what is put into AI is what comes from it. Catherine Parsons joins me to talk about the good and the bad for autistics using AI. Thank you for listening to today's Autistic Moment. Well, Lisa, I am always grateful when we have our opportunities to talk together. There's some wonderful things together, some wonderful points, and I want to kind of close by saying that whatever grief you are experiencing, let that grief, however you work through it, use it to strengthen you, not weaken or set you back. It may take a while before you get past some of those initial stages, but I've often found that some of my personally my greatest moments of rediscovering myself and rediscovering just how strong of a person I am. What do you say to that one, Lisa?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
In due time, you discover something that you're gaining there.
Whether it's, a piece of yourself that you didn't know about. Yes, something.
No, and again, we want to acknowledge that that experience will be different for everybody, and that's okay.
Yes.
Wherever you are on your journey is where you are. But Lisa, thank you so much for being here today. And I love when we get together and talk and we bring to many autistics who may be looking for some answers, some things to think about, and go from there. So
Thank you very much for inviting me. I always enjoy talking with you too.
yeah, thanks. Today's Autistic Community Bulletin Board. All of these events and many others with their links can be found at todaysautisticmoment.com/bulletin board. The Awesome Coffee Club is a space where autistic and neurodivergent adults can connect with each other, foster friendships, and build community while enjoying a favorite beverage or snack. While it is free to participate in Awesome Coffee Club, we ask that participants purchase something from our venue. Awesome Coffee Club meetings will be on September 10th, October 8th, November 12th, and December 3rd at Dogwood Coffee, located at 2700 University Avenue, West St. Paul, Minnesota. The zip code is 55114. Understanding Autism virtual classes are offered by the Autism Society of Minnesota. These classes are perfect for autistic individuals, caregivers, those who want to understand the basics of autism and support autistic people. Classes will be on September 9th at 2 p.m., November 11th at 10 a.m., December 9th at 6 p.m. Classes are free of charge, but you must register to attend. Are you a professional who works with autistic people, such as a therapist, psychologist, occupational therapist, psychiatrist, social worker, case manager, or healthcare provider. Join the awesome professional networking group to work with the Autism Society of Minnesota's counseling and consultation team that offers a resource to help you network with other professionals. Group sessions are held monthly. See Awesome's event calendar for more information. Go to ausm.org to get more information about these and other social and recreational programs, educational events, counseling services, and support groups at the Autism Society of Minnesota. Min Neurodivergent is a social club rooted in a vision of bringing neurodivergent Minnesotans together to build meaningful connections. Its core principle is to foster an environment where all are treated with dignity and respect, regardless of ability or preferences. Go to the bulletin board at todaysautisticmoment.com and click on the meetup link to become a member and attend their events. Today's Autistic Moment is here because of the generosity of supporters and sponsors. Please join the supporters by clicking on Support Today's Autistic Moment on todaysautisticmoment.com. If you work for a company or organization that supports autistic adults and the movement for neurodiversity, I would love to have you sponsor ads on the show. If you would like to sponsor an ad and or have questions about Today's Autistic Moment, please send an email to todaysautisticmoment@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to Today's Autistic Moment, a podcast for autistic adults by an autistic adult. May you have an autistically amazing day. All of the guests meet with me on Zoom to record the interviews. The interview transcripts are provided by Otter. The podcast is prepared and edited on WavePad Masters Edition by NCH Software. The podcast is published by Spotify for Podcasters. The music that you hear is licensed to Today's Autistic Moment by PremiumBeat.com.